Alright, today we're going to take a look at the next chapter in our system, which is going to be the muscular system. As we look into the muscular system, we know we talked about in the tissue unit there are actually three different types of muscles that are going to be found in our body. And those three muscles are going to correspond to different movements of the body. Now, all movements are going to require some sort of chemical energy to cause a contraction, and within this unit, we're going to see some of the importance of some of the chemicals, especially that of one of the minerals that we found in the bones in the skeletal system, that being calcium. Now, those three types of muscles that we learned in the tissue unit, or the skeletal muscle, the smooth muscles, and the cardiac muscles. Now, if we can remember back to what each of them did, the smooth muscle is the muscle that is going to be found inside the digestive tract. And it's going to look something like this, just regular smooth with one nucleus within the middle. The cardiac muscle, you saw there is highly branched, many branches that are going within it. It had the striations within the muscle, all the way up and down. It also had that intercalated disc that's within it. Okay, and those are separated again. Cardiac, being it's very important, actually has its own muscular type. Now the skeletal, which is actually going to be the majority of the rest of this unit, is going to correspond to those muscles that are going to be all striated and has a whole bunch of nucleuses within it. So if I just draw nucleuses, they're all over the place within there. So that's actually the majority of this chapter is going to be on this stuff here, is on the skeletal muscle. Okay, now we zoomed in a little bit to take a look at what this muscles are all going to be, what they're going to do. But here are a couple of their primary jobs, and some of those muscles that are going to incorporate, not only are they going to be used to produce heat, warm the body. This is what we think of when our skeletal muscle, those homeostatic mechanisms in which we shiver, that allows that friction between the muscles to warm the body. But it also is used in smooth muscle, cardiac obviously pumping the blood, but it's also within the arteries themselves, and you're looking at there's a muscle called the detrusor muscle that's actually surrounding that of the bladder that helps us to empty that. But we're going to also see smooth muscle in the ureters, which can propel the urine from the kidneys down into the urinary bladder. So it does a very good job, and of those things that are there, those things are going to help in maintaining homeostasis. So if I look at just smooth muscle first, smooth muscle, remember what our smooth muscle kind of looked like. We had our individual cell and the one nuclei, but it did not have any striations. It is involuntary, lines the organs such as the stomach, bladder, uterus, and blood vessels. It does this process called peristalsis. Please star that one. This one you're going to be seeing quite a bit of. Now, what peristalsis really is, if you think of a balloon, I always picture this, if you have go to the fair, you've got your guy here that's got all these fancy balloon animals that he makes. I don't know what, some sort of an animal that he makes, but they all start with an individual balloon that's fairly long. Now, say he blows into that balloon. He blows into that balloon, you start getting an air bubble. There's your air bubble here. Now, if you were to tip this balloon on its side, if I zoom in on this, if I was to tip this balloon on its side, and there's the air bubble through it, but then we have the rest of the balloon. If I was to squeeze the balloon right there, what's going to happen to this space? What should happen is that balloon bubble should move down. Now, as that moves down, what you're going to see is then again you're going to have something like this, and it'll move down a little bit further, and then you have the rest of it. So I squeeze right behind that. As I squeeze right behind that, that bubble moves even further down. So our next step, as we continue to move, we are going to have further and further, we're going to see this bubble all the way until it reaches the end. And what really comes down to is that bubble, as it continues to move to the end, that is the peristaltic waves. And you can think of the top of that balloon as your mouth, and the bottom of that balloon is your anus. As we enter and put food into our mouth, it continues to be propelled down via the smooth muscle all the way until we can get rid of the materials within it. So they're a constant wave-like contraction that's actually going to go from mouth to anus. The other type thing that's in here, the bullet point, is that they are slow twitch fibers. They are slow contracting fibers, which means that they don't get tired very easily. You would hate to have a hamburger that you're chewing and then all of a sudden your muscles say, give me a 5-minute break. Not a good idea for us. So the nice thing is they're resistant to fatigue, plenty of energy, plenty of mitochondria in these locations, so that way they do not get tired. The last of the muscles that we're really going to talk about for the only difference before we get into the main muscle in this unit, which is skeletal, is that of the cardiac. Cardiac muscle, obviously, it is in the heart. Okay, it's in the heart. It is involuntary. You do not control it. And again, another big thing, it does not fatigue. We do not want our heart to take a 5-minute break either. Now, the rest of this chapter is going to focus here on skeletal muscle. Voluntary muscle that is attached to the bones, and how it attaches to the bones are these guys right here. Tendons. Okay, tendons are going to be the main attachment point, and that, if you remember back in our tissues, that is dense connective tissue, and their job is to attach to the bony processes. Okay, it attaches to the processes on bones. So as we continue to move to our next slide, we talk about skeletal muscles, individual organs. The reason we can say that is because of an organ. Organs are made up of tissues, or tissues are made up of cells. So if we worked all the way down from an individual muscle cell, we notice that it's comprised of not only muscle tissue, but also connective tissue, nervous tissue, and again, blood is a type of connective tissue. So there are 3 different types of tissues that are found just in muscle, each individual muscle. So out of the, really, if you want to know this, 640 different muscles, skeletal muscles in the body. All 640 could be considered its own organ because they contain each of these 3 different types of tissues working together. Now, the connective tissue coverings. Now, this is where it gets kind of tricky. What we're going to start to see is layering of our connective tissue. As we just stated, we can consider it an organ, but with the organ, we have the information, the tissues within it that are going to help build it up. Now, the connective tissue coverings, we have this structure called the fascia. The fascia is going to surround each individual muscle and separate out the muscle. Now, one of the terms that you know of an injury when it talks about fascia is fasciitis. Like the tensor fasciitis, or in the bottom of your feet, plantar fasciitis, that you might also have, which is a problem where this outer layer that separates each muscle starts to pull away and starts to get inflamed. Now, what this fascia does is that it actually stretches out and gives rise to the bones. So if we zoom out on this a little bit, if we think of that is a spot of attachment, that is a spot of attachment, and in between there, let's see if I can get this to work properly, I have a muscle. Okay, now surrounding that muscle is an outer covering, and that outer covering is called the fascia. Okay, so that's the outer covering of the muscle itself. And these guys right here, that point there and this point here, are the tendons. This really is the bone. Okay, the bones that they're attaching to. So if this example was the bicep brachii is the one that's on the upper brachial region. This attachment place may be that of the acromion process at the tip of the shoulder. This would be at the head of the radius. So when this muscle is contracted, it's pulled up, and then the lower arm moves up towards the point of shoulder. Now, working our way down from that whole muscle, we have another connective tissue, not the fascia, but this one's just inferior to that, is called the epimysium. This is going to surround the whole muscle. Now, the other one also did surround the whole muscle. So if you look at it in terms of our layers, we have the fascia is the first layer, and just below that we have the epimysium. Okay, so we have these different layers. Now, just below the epimysium, we then have one other layer. That's actually get this a little bit closer. So we have the fascia, we have the epi. Just below that, deeper to it, we have the peri, and deep to that we have the endo. These are all connective tissue layers from superficial to deep, so the top down, all surrounding. So if you picture yourself like a Tootsie Roll, okay, we have your Tootsie Roll. So if this is your Tootsie Roll itself, that's the actual muscle. Surrounding that, you have the outer covering, the wrapper, and that wrapper has the ends to it, the ends to it. Okay, that outer wrapper is that of the fascia. Now, still the whole muscle, the outermost region of that muscle is the epimysium. Now, if I was to cut into this muscle, if I was to actually cut inside of this, cut this guy in half, I would actually start to see then the layers, and inside there are going to be the two other layers. The next layer down would be the peri, and then the final layer would be the endo. Okay, so if we take a look at what their job is to do, the epi surrounds a whole muscle, the peri surrounds a thing called a fascicle or a muscle bundle, and work it down even further, the endomysium is actually going to cover each of the individual muscle fibers, not the bundles of fibers. So if we take a look at, let's do this, get a brand new slide in here. If we're working our way down, we have a circle layer. I'm just going to look at a front layer, and if say this is the fascia, just below that we have another layer that's in conjunction with it but still surrounds the whole muscle. That whole muscle layer is now called the epimysium. Within there, that is the whole muscle. The whole muscle is broken down into bundles of muscle. So each of these circles are a bundle of muscle. Okay? And a bundle of muscle is called a fascicle. And the outer covering of each fascicle is known as the perimysium. Now if I was to zoom in, then on just one bundle, that bundle is going to be made up of individual fibers. Okay, continued fibers. And surrounding each individual fiber is the endomysium. So that's going superficial to deep, and we're still not quite done yet, because actually inside there you have tiny little, what we call myofibrils. And myofibrils is where all the action takes place. And that's where these guys are here, these myofibrils. And their job is to actually have the contractions take place. And the two magic pieces that this is going to allow to happen are these two protein filaments, actin and myosin. Actin is a thin filament and myosin is a thick filament. If we take a look at our picture from superficial to deep, that's where we kind of look into our coverings. We'll come right back to that, but we're going to look at the structure of the actin and myosin real quick. Here's the actin and myosin that we were just talking about. This is the actin, and this is the myosin. These are inside each of the individual protein filaments. Okay, so if we start to look back at that, in just a second, we'll see the importance of that structure.